Well, hey there. I want to make a video today while it's fresh in my mind, because there was some stuff I was thinking about. Here lately, I have been getting into the Monsterverse stuff a little more. At first, I kind of was iffy about it. Like, I've always loved Godzilla stuff. Like, this goes back for me personally when I was a little kid and Godzilla movies would come on TNT, and my grandma would yell at me for watching. She never yelled, but she would sass me for watching violent stuff, but monsters are cool, and that's why I'm here. And this was an integral part of me becoming the person I am today and the content that I make. So that was one of my first exposures to monsters was the kaiju stuff. So when this MonsterVerse stuff came along, like I saw the first Godzilla in theaters, really had a fun time with it. After that, they kind of lost me a little bit, but I just think I really needed to wrap my head around the material, and I didn't really have the right headspace for it, and it didn't really grab me at the time. But upon a second revisit, I'm much more enjoying it now. So not only do I want to talk about the Monsterverse here, but I do also want to talk about the hiya figures that are produced. Because there's a lot of Monsterverse merchandise. Some is just absolutely god awful. But in my opinion, the top of the top right now is going to be these hiya figures, and we'll talk about those as well. But I want to talk about not only the characters, but the figures and stuff. So where I'm coming from on this with the Monsterverse, I have watched all of the Monsterverse movies in order. Again, I have watched the Monarch show. I am on my second rewatching of it to kind of process everything. Then there is also this Legends of the Monsterverse collected graphic novel that has a bunch of graphic novels in it. I'm working my way through it. I've browsed through it, but I haven't read it all yet. So I may have some more to talk about this book after we read it. But basically, let me start with what I want to talk about with this video is that on surface level, what it didn't hook me with the Monsterverse is it kind of felt like just kind of a dumb action movie, when actually there's a lot to talk about with what the movies have to say. They managed to sneakily put complex concepts in a dumb action movie. You can still critique it to this day and be that science nerd to say like, hey, these monsters wouldn't really be able to exist because physics. It's actually addressed in the lore, which is true. Physically, in the regular real world, they couldn't exist. But essentially, like the way these creatures evolved makes it to where they're like more like material that they're made out of is stronger. That's why they can be big and stuff. But that's a separate critique. It's fair, but I don't want to address that because it does suck the fun out of it. And like I said, there's kind of cool concepts to talk about in this. So first, we're going to talk about Godzilla himself. Now, there's a lot of other things you can watch to learn about Godzilla's different critiques. Like he was originally, don't quote me on this, but if I understand correctly, the first Godzilla was meant to represent mankind playing with atomic weapons, not a good idea, and the consequences of man trying to play God with dangerous weapons. But he's represented a lot of different things over the years. I am not an expert in all the eras and what they all represent, but if I understand correctly, different eras of Godzilla are kind of representing different things. So like, for example, and I don't have him, and God, I hope Hiya makes a Shin Godzilla because he's one of my personal favorites. I believe Shin is about the Fukushima atomic reactor meltdown, if I recall correctly, and the way that they kind of covered it up and didn't deal with it the way they were supposed to. So there's a lot of complex things. But we're not talking about all Godzilla, we're talking about the Monsterverse. So take this with a grain of salt. This is my nerd who was raised by nerds and had a lot of cool nerd teachers who taught me how to do like film critiques and such. So feel free to give me notes on this, but this is my read of overall what you have. So overall, the kaiju, in my opinion, they represent these different archetypes that they're wanting to talk about. The kaiju are basically these avatars in our planet that represent different forces at work, if you will. Some positive, some negative, etc. So in the Monsterverse, the way I read it, Godzilla, you would consider him kind of the eternal judge or the equalizer, because it's kind of what I feel like they were getting at in the first Godzilla and moving forward, that kind of a correction for mankind's sins and that we aren't the top of the food chain, and that Godzilla kind of shows up to correct the balance. So you could call him like the equalizer, to bring order to the chaos. And it's not that he's good, it's more of he is a necessity for the balance of the planet, almost like a Gaia idea. Gaia theory is something interesting to read about if you ever get a chance. This one in particular, this figure, and we'll talk about him in a minute, is from the New Empire, and they do something really interesting, symbolic with the character in the movie with this. So if you watch the movie, you may not have caught all this, but there's also a novelization. And a lot of people made us think about, boo-hoo, Godzilla's pink. Supposedly it's woke or whatever, but we don't listen to those morons, do we? So the reason that he turns pink, so he basically has to evolve. Older Godzilla was much thicker and chunkier, which, here's my burning Godzilla figure we'll talk about in a minute. It was thicker and chunkier, and what he had to do is he had to go to Tiamat. Tiamat is like a solar entity. Tiamat, the character, let me see what I put for my notes for Tiamat on here. But Tiamat basically, I consider him like a serpent of chaos, I guess you would say. Kind of like an unrefined potential. Is what it represents to me in the film story. But basically in the story, Tiamat, and I don't have a figure because it's not out yet, by the way, but Tiamat basically is in this one place in the world that is collecting like the solar winds and the solar energy, so the power of the sun. And Godzilla basically consumes Tiamat and Tiamat's energy in that spot to become this like solar deity. So he not only comes from like this protector place, but in the New Empire, it evolves. He becomes leaner, more like it literally evolves. And then basically the solar energy is absorbed into his spikes to evolve him up. That's what you have, because what they're telling in the story, it's an opposing force, because we're going to talk about the opposing force in a minute. Let's talk about the figures now. I don't have material put together to talk about Burning Godzilla, but it is essentially like a part in one of the earlier Godzillas where he absorbs a super bunch of radiation and almost kind of goes out of control. I just don't have notes prepared for that, but let's talk about the figures now. So this figure, everything except for this one is the figures as they came. This is why I say these hiya figures are fire. Pun intended here. Anyway, so like, you know, you've got a lot of options. I think Playmates makes the ones for kids. They're really cheap. You get what you pay for on those. I don't have any of them because they just, in my opinion, look like trash. But they're fine. I'm glad that they're out there because they get little kids into this stuff. Let me not call them trash. I don't want to be mean at all, because I want little kids to see those little, in my opinion, trash figures and get excited about monsters and then grow up to be like me and then go get this stuff. So I'm sorry. Let me take that back. I don't want to be trash. I want to be mean or negative. But anyway, Playmates is kind of the lowest quality of these. Then you have some different ones. NECA did Godzilla for a while, had the license. I have an original NECA Godzilla somewhere in my stuff. It's packed up. I don't know where it's at. But then Hiya came along, and that's really what kind of hooked me back into the Godzillaverse, honestly, was I started seeing these critiques of the Hiya figures, and everybody's like, oh my God, they're so good. There's also Bandai SH Monster Arts figures, which are good. They've always kind of been considered the pinnacle until these started coming out, and then I started seeing reviews, and then I had to see for myself and make my own judgment, and I do agree with these reviews, that Hiya, in my opinion, surpasses the quality of the Monster Arts at a fraction of the price, which is nuts. Because these are basically at like a $40 to $80 price point, or what I have on the table, where Monster Arts would literally be double. And then the quality, I think, is better. Now, I don't have any. I've had my hands on some Monster Arts. I had friends who've had them before, and they're perfectly fine. But then when you see them compared to the Hiyas are just a little bit better, in my opinion. But the articulation is just phenomenal on these. Something that you can critique NECA with all day long is when they do different variations of a character. They'll just do a repaint. Hiya, not that I've seen, I don't think they do that. They'll do re-releases too, and there's changes in the figure sculpting. But like when you compare these side by side, what I'm talking about here, the evolution, you see it because it's a completely different sculpt, because the older evolution of Godzilla is much thicker, and then the newer one, it's a completely different sculpt. I never touched the paint on this at all because I'm really happy on their paint with the Burning Godzilla. Just absolutely sick work that they did with it. And then I got this, and there's a video from yesterday, which you can see. This is the only one I had any critiques on the paint. The paint I did not like on the spikes, but I fixed it, and I am very happy with it now. Now it is what I feel is like a 10 out of 10 character. But yeah, I just really like the addition of the pink. It's just, as a painter, like, I'm also critiquing these figures as an artist myself, because when I look at a figure, I repaint figures, if you haven't seen my channel, and it's like, these other ones came out so good, it's like, I don't really feel like I can do much to improve on them, and that says a lot to me as a customer buying the things. This one I had to do a little bit of punch up, but again, like, I'm not mad, because it gave me an opportunity to do something fun, to make a fun video. So if you go get this figure, and you feel like I do about the spikes, I've hopefully made a video that makes it really easy for you to do the repaint yourself and just follow my steps. So yeah, Really rad figures. What's cool too about this one, like I said, it's a completely different sculpt, is they chose to like put a pivot in here for this middle sculpt, middle spike to move around, because they really put a lot of work into like the mid-body articulation. These things really pose really good. Like it would be really easy to say these are thick, clunky characters and just not add a lot of really good articulation, but damn if they didn't do it with like the different pieces of the neck, with the mouth, the tongue, like everything, individual spikes on the new Empire one, you know, all of the above that I have to say. And then even with the evolution, this, by the way, is what paleontologists call a thagomizer on Stegosauruses. They even gave him a thagomizer on this evolution, which is badass. All the things that I love. And like I said, I did a little bit of punch up, especially the face spikes didn't really have any paint, and I gave them paint up too, and I love that even more. It just gives me what I wanted out of the figure. So there we've talked about the Godzilla, the character in the Monsterverse. We talked about the two figures that I have. There's a lot more. There's a lot of them I don't have. There's characters I don't have, which I'll talk about briefly at the end here. Next one I'll talk about is the Skullcrawler. And man, I really didn't like this character when I first watched the Kong movie in theaters, but as I've rewatched it, dude, it might now be one of my favorites of the whole series, the movie and the character. So like, basically what we could say about, I'm sorry, I'm grabbing my notes. I just had to take a lot of notes for these ideas. I'm very scrambled. Basically what I want to say about the Skullcrawler and what I feel like it represents is this kind of a gluttonous archetype, because if you watch the movie Skull Island, Kong, which we'll talk about briefly, or not, we'll talk about more in depth on the other figure, but Kong's there as like kind of the avatar of mankind, and then the Skullcrawlers are like these ravenous creatures that just eat and consume, and they've made it to where Kong's the last of his kind. And essentially the archetype that the Skullcrawler represents is this gluttonous void. They're insatiable. They just eat and continue to eat after they're full. They just eat and eat and eat and consume. It is almost like this kind of, I don't know if I'm talking out of my ass, but like kind of like an Aztec underworld thing they had going on, because they come from deep under the world. They come from the underworld, Hades, hell, however you want to shake that out. And yeah, like they literally don't have hind legs, which is a wild design. And it's literally like they're crawling. Like it's a much more primal, primitive kind of thing that they really are doing visually with the design of the creature. And I just, that's a lot of thought was put into this that I didn't catch on first glance. The figure itself, again, no notes on the figure overall. Like the paint app is fine. I don't feel like it needs to be complex, because the movie, it's pretty accurate to how it looks in the movie. They even did like washes in the mouth, which is something I would have done personally if I were painting this. I didn't do any of this. I appreciate the like flexible material for the jaw hinge. I'm trying to catch it with the camera. I'm sorry, the light. And there we go. And there's more flexible material in the mouth, and it's kind of on a hinge. I just really like that. Really dig this figure. Not really any notes on this, just really happy with it. There's another one too. I don't have it. I don't have the figure, so I can't really talk about it. So I have it in hand. One day maybe I'll get to collect them all. I don't know. Now I want to keep rolling with the Skull Island and then talk about Kong, the other kind of main archetype of the story. Where's my notes on Kong? There we go. All right. And then Kong, like they really had a lot to say in Skull Island about Kong. Kong is basically humanity's avatar. It's kind of representing like the potential of mankind. And then in the story, the Kongs were kind of ruling Hollow Earth, kind of like people, but like a more primitive, powerful version of people. They were tool makers, but that's really, it's pretty obvious what it represents in the movies if you're not even looking that deep of like, basically the human mirror. It's the protector of mankind, but it's made to be kind of a balance to Kong too, where it's like, Kong is the equalizer for the good of the planet, and then Godzilla is the equalizer for the planet, and Kong is basically mankind's advocate. Now, talking about the figure, I just don't have that much more in the notes to say about him, but it's just a cool character too. You really, actually, I do have some more to say on that. Like in the movie, you'll notice too, there's much more of emotion and compassion. Kong is really treated as a humanized character, with a lot more like civilized aspects than you expect out of a giant ape. But that's what they're trying to say, I think, with the movie. But yeah, like there's a lot of emotion. There's a little girl that has this like symbiotic connection with him in the character in the movie. It's pretty cool. All right, figure. Sorry, I just got to be mindful of time in this video and stuff. Talking about the figure, the other figure of Kong that I feel like is even on even ground with this was the Mezco Kong. Now, I don't have the figure arts to speak on them, and the pictures of them looked fine. So I really don't want to talk out of my ass without having the SH Monster Arts Kong in hand. But the hiya is just phenomenal. And like what really stunned me out of this figure overall was the freaking eyes. There's 3 heads for him. I don't have the other out right now. But like the way they did the eyes is very similar to how the newer Hammond Collection T-Rex, where it's kind of like they follow you a little bit. They have a lot of depth in them. Just killer stuff. I also I had the Mezco. It's somewhere in my stuff. But when I had the Mezco, I made him an X. I 3D printed it, and it was cool and stuff. But damn, like hiya went up me on this too. In my axe, I used a translucent green 3D printed resin print, and then I painted over it. But what they've done was they kind of did the same thing, where this is translucent plastic, but it's translucent orange in some places and translucent blue for the axe itself. Which I think they did better than I did. So shit, like if you're a figure maker and you're, trumping what I do, it's great stuff. So this is a great figure, really nice full articulation with the midsection stuff, just like I had to say about the other ones. I haven't played around with posing much, but I'd like to. Several hands for like grasping onto stuff. So if you wanted to do little like dioramas and have him like grabbing and swinging from stuff, you can actually absolutely pull that off with him. It's a little hard to balance standing up. I haven't played with it much. I might kind of hit it with a hairdryer to give it some more posability, like without worrying about putting stress on the joints. It's kind of hard to stand off him, but I'm pretty sure I could fool with it and get him to where the center of balance will stand a lot better. Because it's not that he's, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. It's not that he's like cumbersome where he won't stand. I think you just have to fiddle with it and get the center of gravity over the front of the feet. But yeah, just sick figure. Kong is probably one of my lesser favorite characters of the Monsterverse, but they did so good on the figure. I'm excited about the figure, and it's kind of giving me more joy about the character. So there's Kong. So yeah, that's pretty much what I had to say about Skull Island. I could do another in-depth video on it because there's so much cool stuff with what was going on with the movie. I feel like they were pulling inspiration from like Princess Mononoke and shit like that in the movie. A lot of cool stuff with the different animals, because there's not just Kong on the island. There's not just skull crawlers, but there's like giant deer that have like trees and stuff growing on them, growing out of them, kind of shit. It's just crazy. These big giant bamboo spiders that are like 20 feet tall. Anyway, let's move right along here. So we've talked about Kong the character and the figure. Getting towards the end here. Mothra. This really, what can you really do with Mothra as a figure? But damn, they did it. Mothra is a really interesting character in the story. So you have like the 2 opposing forces of Kong and Godzilla. And Mothra, I guess my interpretation of it is Mothra I would call like the mediator of the 2. Kind of like the parent keeping the 2 in check. So you could say it's almost like a mother deity is the way I look at it. Kind of like the Godzilla whisper, because there's so much interaction with Mothra and Godzilla to where it's basically a meme at this point, the way they're like almost like a relationship or something, but like it's not really what they're trying to get to you with them, because like Mothra has like literally like powered up and saved Godzilla in many different ways. But yeah, look at it as like a mother deity, a mother avatar, what it represents. And also some reincarnation stuff, the way it gets like burned down. And then like you can go further in depth with Moth and like archetypes in film and mythology, to where it's like it reincarnates itself. It's a worm that goes into a cocoon and comes out an evolved creature that can fly. Much deeper conversation you can have with like moths and butterflies with that. But yeah, now talking about the figure, yeah, just 10 out of 10. Like they managed to take like, it's like just even the scale compared, it's very difficult to pull off. Like, because in the movie, I mean, it's the wings are so massive, right? Kind of thing. But yeah, these freaking absolutely massive wings, beautifully painted. I can't remember which variant of Mothra this is. It's like a powered up one or something, I think. I just liked it out of all of the ones that I chose from. But they include this little stand for good flight poses, and all the little legs and arms articulate. Maybe if I had the time and the patience, I might like maybe hit it with some washes to give it even more of like a dynamic appearance. But I'm overall very happy with it. I wouldn't have bought a Mothra figure, but the hiya one, it convinced me. It pushed me over the edge to get it. Now I get to talk about my favorite of the Monster Arts figures, and one of the newer ones, which was the Shimo. And man, you want to talk about one that was a night and day difference between what Bandai did, the Monster Arts versus hiya. The Monster Arts one is like hundreds of dollars and like pales in comparison to this one. The only thing that I'm going to give the Monster Arts one's credit is that the spikes were translucent separate pieces that were put in here, whereas they painted these. But I look at this, just look at the colors. I don't care, because these look so good. Like they may not be as superior like put together, but they look better because of the way that I guess they've airbrushed this. And this was the first hiya figure I ever had at all these. And when I got it, I was just like, as a painter, as an artist, this is what I would have done with everything on it. The color choices. If you know me, you know I work with like Turbo Dork metallics and shit. Like, I wonder if this factory had Turbo Dork, because the way that these metallics turned out. I mean, Greg, I think you'd agree with me on this. Like, this is some superb translucence that they pulled off here. So yeah, talking about, let me pull my notes for Shimo. So remember I told you Shimo is basically an opposing opposite of Godzilla in the story, because Godzilla is, basically becomes this like sun avatar, if you will. Shimo in the movie is like a giant dragon that breathes ice. So it's basically the opposing opposite of Godzilla in New Empire, So, Godzilla basically is the fire avatar in the story, and then this is the ice avatar. Literally, like, they're just shoving it in your face almost at this point. From a character design, it's interesting because, like, I had trouble wrapping my head around the design of Shimo as a creature, but I guess what they kind of did, like, looking at it and thinking from a biological perspective, really makes me think of a polar bear, because it's not like a dragon. Its body proportions are very different from like traditional dragon stuff. And he stands up on, especially you see it when Shimo stands up on 2 feet in the movies, and you can pull this off of this figure. It'd take me too long to put it in the video and do it right. But he stands up on 2 feet, looks just like a freaking polar bear with proportions. But absolutely massive as a figure. But yeah, the other thing too to talk about the character is, like, basically Shimo represents this, like, it's like a parallel to Godzilla, but in the movie Scar King is basically like the imprisoner of Shimo, using it as a tool. So Shimo also represents like the victim and the tool, like being taken advantage of and used until she, I guess, breaks free, kind of thing. But it's basically a representation of like nature enslaved, because Scar represents the worst aspects of humanity in the ape. And I don't have a figure, otherwise I'd love to talk more in depth about that too. I just don't have it. There are other figures coming that hopefully I'll get to get one day. But yeah, that's kind of what I have to say about Shimo, the character. And then the figure, like I said, the pearlescence is just off the charts. Beautiful with this. There's just different variations, and they did a lot of work with washes. Again, posability is just phenomenal with all the different segments and stuff. So you can stand it up on 2 legs, and it has the balance and the support to pull that off. But yeah, so that's it. So again, like, if you're a Godzilla fan, these hiya figures are just absolutely amazing. I highly recommend them if you want to start collecting them. That's everything I had to say about the Monsterverse and what I feel like it represents. I hope I didn't bore you to sleep. I hope if you like analysis of films that this gave you something to think about with the movies. If you disagree with my reads on these characters, please let me know. This is a discussion. This is not me stating an authority on anything. I'll read the Monsterverse book eventually, and I'll get back to you on that. So thank you for tuning in on this big, long video about Godzilla. That's all the things I have to say, and now I got to go work. So bye, guys.